Good morning. Hello. Oh my God, we're all back here. Hi, everybody. It is so good to see you all. I have some notes. Not about the fair. No, I have some notes to read to you today. It is so lovely to be back at Maker Faire on a Sunday morning giving a sermon. It is, as it has been every single year, my deep honor to address you guys this morning, and I thank you for being here with me. I've actually filmed dozens and dozens of hours of television on Mare Island. Over at, 575 Connolly, I dressed as Indiana Jones. I tested airplane boarding, and I fought zombies. Anybody in the crowd was a zombie for us on MythBusters? Anybody? I will tell you that when you're in an empty 150-year-old warehouse and a bunch of zombies, even if they're from local towns, are ambling towards you making zombie sounds, it's freaking terrifying. I promote a definition of making that is so broad, it's almost meaningless. I think that making is any time you reach out with your point of view and make something new. You are all makers. Every single person here. And when I started thinking about this talk, I started with an axiom of I wanted to talk about making as self-improvement. And I didn't have any other thoughts than that. And then these 8 pages came out, and they're weirdly, deeply personal. So strap in. I'll love you right back. The first thing I want you to know is that I was a lonely kid. I didn't make friends easily, and I didn't know how to act around other kids. I was really lonely. And of course, that's a simplified version of the story, and it doesn't make me unique or special. It's a salient fact. I had this recurring dream when I was a kid, one that repeatedly woke me up petrified. And the specific details of the dream shifted over time, but the feeling was always the same. The feeling was that within the midst of some trauma, I was, in the dream, both the smallest thing in the room, and I was also the room. I was the smallest thing in the room, and I was also the room. And the feeling left me not of a bifurcation. It didn't leave me feeling separated into two halves. It was more like claustrophobia mixed with vertigo. And I had that dream maybe half a dozen times as a child, from like 5 years old. Okay, that being said, my family has a lovely house in a nice vacation spot that's been in my family for 5 generations. I grew up going there for a month every summer. I never wore shoes. I ran around like a wild animal. It was amazing, and also it sucked. I remembered it as an idyllic time. And then later, I realized I had blocked some memories of just how cruel my fellow peers among the 5 generations of families could actually be. Kids can be cruel. I remember a daytime trip when I was about 7 years old, where every kid in the entire area had been invited except for me. And I begged to be invited, and I was turned down. And I couldn't figure out why I was so lonely. I knew that whenever I hung around other kids for too long, I would eventually say something stupid and get made fun of. That seemed to happen a lot. I knew that I wished for the kind of camaraderie I saw in television and in movies. But try as I might, I couldn't figure out how to locate it. I only knew I wanted a cessation, an end to this loneliness. And pop music was my best friend at this time. A massive comfort, even though I dare not speak of my preferences to others. Oh no. I had already experienced seemingly innocuous conversations in which I let slip a particular preference and was met with derision for that choice. So I made a note to myself, do not reveal personal preferences. But still, the comfort was real. Pop music, specifically the mainstream hits of the 70s through the 80s, were a primary succor, as well as the soundtrack of my developing mind. The music of Stevie Wonder, Wings, ABBA, to Air Supply, Steely Dan to Cyndi Lauper spun musical visions for me of who I wanted to be. My son's joked today that I still have the musical taste of a 14-year-old girl. I spent literally years in my room in Tarrytown, New York, every single weekend listening to Casey Kasem count down the American Top 40 while I built endless things with Legos. I was building spaceports. I was building whole economies of Lego. Spaceports, Death Stars, secret doors, narrative adventures, and also, if I'm going to be honest, I was building a castle moat. I was building a wall. I was building a bulwark. The wall had a purpose, and it was to stand between my loneliness and my conscious self. What I didn't know, in fact, even until recently, was that at the same time I was seeking protection from the outside world by building this wall, in the building I was doing with Legos and papercraft, I was also building my own specific point of view. The constructions and the stories that I was indulging in were absolutely distractions. I was running away from the loneliness. Look, even today, I have processed grief and loss at the very moment it's happening by standing at my workbench and drowning it out. It's glorious. But this is the amazing thing about being a person, is that every one of our coping mechanisms carries with it not just the tragedy that necessitated it, but also a superpower. Small me, self-soothed by concentrating on tiny things carefully, specifically paying endless attention to minute details, and getting lost in them and the stories I created around them. I was using that practice to drown out the fact that I didn't know how to have friends, but at the same time, that practice, that iterative process of ideation, creation, and play was building something vital and important in me. My very self was forming around the thoughts and ideas that I couldn't get out of my head. And as my creations improved, so did my confidence and my self-esteem. So while I was running towards something else, and what I was running away from was truly a thought, and the most terrifying thought in my head, which is that I was lonely because I deserved to be lonely. This is what a child does with trauma. They take responsibility for it because it's the only path that gives them a measure of control. And this is actually a comfort because it means that something might be able to be done. When I assumed fault, I also assumed the task of finding out why. And what I found at the workbench, and what others find in the pen or the guitar or the building or the textiles, what I found at the bench was a measure of mind calming control, at least for the moment, within the act of doing. I found a level of attentiveness that paid dividends I couldn't imagine. And like I said, I was running headlong into something. I was running towards extreme specificity, concentration, attention to detail. This was its own kind of crucible. This furnace of doing shaped me today and showed me what was possible if I paid attention and listened carefully. When I was 27 years old, I was listening carefully, and I realized that I hadn't made sculptures in months, and that was because commercial special effects was feeding all of my creative needs. And then I realized maybe this is what a career feels like. And so I dived in, I leaned in head first. I worked constantly. I worked in commercials during the day and made other models and constructions at night, on Deckard's Blade Runner blaster, on other things I couldn't get out of my head. We all made films on the weekends. I pursued excellence. And in that pursuit, I found my purpose and my skill. I found a discipline that fed me, literally and figuratively. A career that used all the parts of me that I had ever developed up until then. And around that time, a public form of my life arrived, in the form of a show called MythBusters. Thank you.
Thank you for it.
Well, and I'm sorry, thank you. Nothing was more fun than making that show with that team, and I'm sorry if your kids burned down the garage. And you're welcome. I made television for a long while. I made many a show that I'm proud of with people that I love, and I learned as much in those 16 years of making television as I had in the previous 36 years. I got to experience a ridiculous and staggering array of uncomparable experiences. And then things got really quiet during COVID. And during COVID, I leaned into this new medium with all of my concentration into YouTube. And there I found my discipline anew. And again, the pleasure of the workbench. For decades, my personal work has always occurred on the margins of my professional work, and I treated it as a catch-as-catch-can scarcity model. If I had an extra hour in a day, I would race to the shop, spend 55 minutes doing something, and race to the next thing. When I started spending every day in the shop over COVID, it took months for me to stop treating it with that scarcity model. I was so manic. I didn't have to rush over there every day. There was going to be time, there is time to get stuff done. And YouTube has allowed me to go back into that room with the Legos, listening to pop music. And it's been a long overdue return to an old self with a lot of mileage in between. And lots of people say to me that tested and the videos we put out got them through COVID, and the truth is that they also got me through COVID. The conversation I feel like I got to and get to have with you guys, the maker community in general, and our patrons specifically, is wide-ranging and infinitely inspiring. My kids are grown now, and there's nothing like adult versions of you. Small kid, there's nothing like your adult children to give you a time machine to your young self, and you really get to, you remember being those ages. And in January of this year, I spent a few weeks in New York City and took some time while I was staying there to reflect upon the version of me that I was when I lived there in the second half of the 80s. I will admit to you, I didn't think very kindly for the longest time on that version of me in New York from 86 to 1990. I was manic, I was self-absorbed, I was exhausting. But I was also making some really nifty things, both by myself and with others. Spending so many weeks in my old city reminded me of endless nights in my Park Slope, 5th floor walk-up, making shit in my apartment, listening to Laurie Anderson, Joan Armatrading, Peter Gabriel. And kids, I know I just cursed there, but there's just something you should know. Is that when adults curse, it is so cool. It's literally, it's like the reward we get for having to pay all those bills. And when children curse, it's really gross to adults. So just don't curse around adults, that's all. I realized that that version of me was laying down some important foundations for future me, and present me is really grateful. And a while ago, I was thinking about that vacation house, and I was thinking about my childhood and the cruelty of kids and why I was lonely. And something dawned on me. A set of facts started to crystallize, and I realized, this is not going to be a shock to any of you, that I was a super hyperactive kid. I was one of those kids. I was that kid your parents made you invite to the birthday party. I was last picked on every team. I didn't have no self-control, but I didn't have much. I was, in fact, to quote Shakespeare, I was much of a muchness. And not knowing how to behave and desperate to be seen, I worked at being seen with a real vengeance. I have many childhood memories of exasperated adults impatiently dressing down my antics and seeing their faces enraged at my pathologies. And I gotta say, since that realization, since I started thinking about that kid and his affect, I realized I had complicated feelings about it. A lot of epiphanies come with I get it, I see why my mom's that way. This one didn't arrive like that. This arrived with a whole bunch of complicated emotions. It didn't sit well with me that I was that kid. And that bears some interrogation, and I thought, well, okay, I should look at that. Why I didn't like that fact? Well, I had to admit that I'm still angry at that kid. I'm enraged even, and why? Because he was the reason I was lonely. It was his fault. It was him who lacked self-control. He who wanted to be seen so badly that he'd yell and say dumb things. It was him who didn't fully understand the social cues and took jokes too far. And I was the one that learned how to watch how people acted and imitate them. I was the one who ran subroutines over top of normal, regular brain stuff. Stuff that gave subroutines like, don't ever talk about your music. I am the one, at 56 years old today, still so instilled with this innate terror of being alone, that I require myself to bifurcate from that kid. And here I was, adhering to this bifurcated version of myself. Here is me in the present, and there was him in the past. And present me still wanted to be separate from him. This isn't right. I can see how much lovely stuff about that awkward kid brought me to exactly this moment today, and I wouldn't change a goddamn thing. His watchfulness gave me empathy. His love of concentration gave me nearly all of my skills. And that nightmare that I talked about, the feeling that I'm the smallest thing in the room and also the room itself, the feeling from that dream has shown up since my youth, but not in dreams. And it comes around about every couple of years. And it's always arrived at the workbench. Never during a triumph or a tragedy at the workbench. It's always in the middle of a basic vanilla flow state in which everything's sort of crackling along. And when I'm in the right state of mind, that old vertiginous feeling comes that I am the smallest thing in the room and also the room. And it's not scary, though it is intense. Instead, it feels like a widening of my consciousness about my shop and shop practice in general. That when I'm truly paying attention with all of my faculties, I am both the smallest thing in the room, in that the shop is a microscope pointed directly at whatever I'm working at, and I am the room itself, in that the room itself exists in real life, but also entirely in my head. I know every millimeter of this room. The shop is not just an externalization of my philosophy of working, although it's certainly that. What's also true is that the shop is me and I am the shop. And this ultimately is the abiding lesson of the workbench in my life and of shop practice in general, and of a life lived like all of our lives are lived, with endless iterations of failures and successes. This is, for me, the central reason that I make. It's because when I make, and I pay attention to the things that I'm making, I learn important things about myself and about being a better person. And that's why I believe in the end, we all make. When world-famous cellist Pablo Casals was asked at the age of 90 why he still felt it necessary to practice the cello every single day, he said, "Because I think I'm making real progress." I am a science communicator, and the fact of our sentience, that we know is the least explainable thing I can think of. And I think that we make because possessing sentience is far too weird for simple words and conversations. So weird, in fact, we have to invent other modes of communication called novels and paintings and mud wrestling. We talk about our experience for sure, but we also dance about it, we sew about it, we cosplay about it. We make because being a person and maintaining a self in the chaos of life requires so much more from us than language and list making. It requires more than following the rules and more than breaking them. It requires zooming out until things get really weird. Out there you can really see things, and when you do see them and you find that you're driven and must communicate that experience, but because rhetoric is without a doubt the worst possible way to confront the unknown, you cracked out the Legos or the poetry or the guitar or the stained glass, and you poured your attention into something until that thing you were making told you what it needed to be and what it wanted to be and what you were supposed to do with it. And then, hopefully, if you listen carefully, if I listen carefully, I can take it those last 10 yards. You brought that creation into the world. And what that thing is, it's you. It's us. It's a piece. It's a reflection. We are looking at reflections of ourselves in the things we make. And it's that simple, and it's not a bug or a feature. It's the nature of groups of people communicating their experience. That's culture. And what is culture but a cavernous hall of mirrors in which we serve up and imbibe every possible version of what we might be and what we might become. Let me ask you this. In your pursuit of getting better at something that you got good at, what was the biggest challenge? Think on this for a second. What was the biggest challenge? Was it the expense? Was it the time? I think if any of us are going to be honest, the biggest obstacle to improvement is always simply ourselves. And that to have gotten excellent at something means that you have confronted all sorts of your own demons, your time management skills, your inertia, your jealousy, your venality, your insecurity, your feeling sorry for yourself, your rage at mistakes. None of it means anything, and it all means everything. We make, because when we really pour our things into things, when we really pour ourselves into things that we care about, those things we create can sometimes live beyond us. They can change with time just as we do. And they can teach us about ourselves. I'm still learning about my aesthetics from sculptures I made 40 years ago. We make because humans are natural explorers, not just outwardly, but inwardly. And when we truly engage in the discipline of excellence, we've commensurately engaged in a discipline of self-knowledge. I am still working on connecting with that kid, that young version of me. And there will always be work to do, but writing down these thoughts for you has been an important part of that process, and I thank you for your time. All you guys. Oh, love you, love you, love you. I never, I wrote this out and I was like, boy, I wonder how that's gonna go. You guys have always been so supportive. One of the things that I love that I realized is there's no longer really a cultural debate about the difference between art and craft, and I'm so happy that that conversation's in the trash, because there is no distinction. I have here, I have 30 more minutes, and then I have to bolt to go fly to San Diego to host a dinner with 40 chiefs of police. My life is really strange right now. But I do have 30 minutes for questions, right? Can I take some questions? Is there a microphone in the audience? So we have a microphone in the audience, and Dale's going to hand it around, and if you have personal questions, I'm happy to tell you my favorite brand of Strike Anywhere matches. Blue Diamond, of course.
Two.
There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Dale Doherty.
Thank you, Adam. It is so amazing to have you here. We're all grateful. Who has a question for Adam right in this group here? Anybody? There we go. Excuse me.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much. It's just been such a pleasure to grow up with you. My kids grow up with you. Just fantastic. My kids are here today. Could you tell them a little bit about your educational path and how you got to where you are?
There's a family chip on my shoulder. My father got kicked out of Cooper Hewitt, got kicked out of Pratt, got kicked out of the Art Students League, and ended up teaching in all of them. And so when I was at NYU at 18 and I was exhausting and I didn't know myself, I dropped out because I thought, I'm going to be that clever. I'm going to be like Dad. And I made the mistake of thinking that clever was enough. It took me a few years for life to get that out of me. The world is full of clever people who have not done anything important. So I, in addition to my high school education in Tarrytown, New York, in a phenomenal public school system that town has, I spent 6 months at NYU studying acting, and then a few classes at the School of Visual Arts and Package Design, and everything else I have learned on the clock. George Coates, a really early progenitor of alternative San Francisco theater, once told me to say, I have the benefit of being completely untrained. Thank you. Listen, my issues with education were personal. I didn't know what I wanted. And my wife has also this story. Like, she went to state for a couple of years and then dropped out because she didn't know what she wanted, and then moved to Chicago and lived with a boyfriend, saw her friends going to college and was like, oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't miss this train. And then realized that she was interested in literature and never got another anything but an A again because she was back in school knowing what she wanted. So I'm a big believer in going to school for a reason. I don't think it's an automatic that at 19 you should just go off to college. My son went to LA and worked in film production and came back with a 1,000-yard stare before he went to college, and I think that's really useful.
Okay, we got another.
Hi there, my name is Raihana. Thank you for the talk. I grew up watching MythBusters and I'm so inspired by everything that you do. I find myself making a lot of things lately. I call myself a maker as well. And sometimes I get stuck, as we all do maybe. And what's your biggest tip on getting unstuck?
My biggest tip on getting unstuck is organization. There's always a shelf or a drawer I have ignored. And Mary Carr is a wonderful writer, memoirist, and she was asked about what she does about writer's block, and I love her practice. She says, when I have writer's block, I simply sit at my desk and copy out the writing of writers I love in longhand. It's an amazing thing to do, to put someone else's words through your literal body. And she said, my fidelity at the writing desk is to write. I don't have to write my own stuff, but the practice of writing is what's important. And so to me, when I can't think aesthetically of what the next challenge that I want to tackle is, looking for a shelf or a drawer that needs organization and diving into that for a few hours always provides a wonderful sort of remove from the situation and a kind of a fresh start back into the aesthetics. And then the shop gets more organized, although it's never done.
All right.
I just wanted to comment that as somebody who grew up on the spectrum and works with people on the spectrum, your experience has really resonated with me. I think maybe about 50% of makers are on the spectrum, so.
You know, one of my sons has ADHD, and I got a chance a couple years ago to drive through the Southwest with him for a week, and I got to see how much ADHD I still have. I was all like, oh my God, you only listen to the middle of songs and then move on to the next one? Me too. And he had a really difficult time in school. He's never graduated from high school. And I don't care. I don't care about that. But I did think, you know, if we had slightly less rigid educational system, it might be a little easier on his soul. And I think we all know where we need some elbow room.
Yeah.
But thank you for that.
Okay.
Out of all the myths you busted and all the years you've done MythBusters, what was your favorite one to do?
Oh, impossible. Impossible to answer. Exploding water heaters are, in fact, one of the most delicious sounds in the whole world. I wish you could hear one. I pray you never do. You know, for me, the episodes that really stand out are weirder than the cement truck. They're the ones that sort of showed me a new idea of what the show could be. So, for instance, when we were doing Penny thrown from the Empire State Building will kill you when it hits the ground, I had this whole piece of camera I'd done in conjunction with some NASA scientists and mathematicians about how a penny has more than one terminal velocity and why it tumbles in a specific way that it does. And this is literally mid-season 1. We're filming this brand new show. No one's told us how to host a show, and it's already airing, and it's already a hit. So life is really strange. And I am filming these episodes and kind of doing what I'm told, and then I'm flying back from New York, from the Empire State Building, in fact, and I'm thinking, oh, I have this point of view all of a sudden. And my point of view is that I don't feel like talking about math is quite enough. Like this piece of camera I did about the 2 terminal velocities of a penny. It's highly intellectual and it doesn't make sense to me in my body. So I thought, oh, I wonder if I could build a wind tunnel that would show the 2 terminal velocities of a penny. And so I thought, okay, well, if I was to build a wind tunnel like that and it was to work, here would be my expected hypothesis of what would happen. And so I made a wind tunnel that met my specifications on the theory that if I put a penny in it and it was correctly tuned, the penny would tumble up and down. And the moment I put the penny in, it tumbled up and down. Exactly like what I had hypothesized. And the endorphin rush, I still get it today telling this story to you now. I understood in that moment, I got the peak above the clouds, why every working scientist I have ever met loves their freaking job. And no matter how weird their job might sound, like sexing fruit flies or whatever they're doing. So those episodes, another one was Lead Balloon, which frankly, when we wrote the outline for Lead Balloon, our editing team looked at it and was like, okay, cool, that's a 25-minute episode, 25-minute story. And then when the first cut came back at 57 minutes. And this taught us that we could make great television without bombast, without weapons, without violence. We could tell these weird stories of just two guys, 5 people actually, trying to figure out stuff. Those were our favorite narratives. And in fact, later on, the more involved we got in narratives, the better those narratives were. I still can't think of a MythBusters moment more amazing to me than the look on Grant and Tori's face when the ice fell off when the pea ice fell off that airplane. Literally just, they're like, oh, it's just amazing. Okay, yeah.
Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Really quick. So for those of us who started in theater 20 years ago and took whatever job for whatever pennies and worked for 30 hours in a day, the industry is changing. What do you tell those new creators, those new stagehands, how to help revolutionize the changes that we're starting to see?
Oh, wait, I don't know how the industry is changing.
Broadway is going no more 10 out of 12s. They're pushing for that, for shorter hours, for more breaks. Pay your interns, not just...
I love that so much. Honestly, in the horrifying news coming from every corner of the world, the United States labor market is one of the most regular causes for joy in my heart. You know, theater is such an amazing gateway drug to making. The threshold is often low. The threshold to entry is often low, and the hours can be terrible. I'm really glad to hear that people are shaping up. And I mean, I remember turning in a pay stub for 2 weeks that was 205 hours in 2 weeks. I was sleeping in the bleachers. Yeah, we got that job done. You know, I know that there are, I believe in paying people what they're worth. I think that anyone working 40 hours a week should make a living wage and be able to afford their apartment and their health care and their kids.
Thanks for all the episodes of MythBusters. They love it, I loved it. But I have one burning question on my mind is, what are you going to be for Halloween?
It's funny, I've been thinking about that. I've just been invited to a Halloween party in which you should come as your favorite made-up villain or superhero. And it's hard for me to get past being the handyman. And I picture this big wrench over my shoulder. But I don't know, I have so many superhero costumes, I've been sort of letting that gestate in my head. Halloween is usually a weirdly late decision for me. And it might even be that on the night of Halloween, I'll just go to storage, grab my Wookiee costume, and walk around the mission. What's great about a Wookiee costume is that it is literally the closest thing to being a rock star you can experience. People just run towards you and hug you. In the mission, my neighborhood, people just go, "Hey, Adam." They said that to me whether I'm wearing a bear costume or a dinosaur costume or the Wookiee.
Hi, good morning, Adam.
Good morning.
Thank you. I'm Teresa. I am a science as well as a STEAM educator. And my question is you've done a great job on promoting science as a communicator. And this kind of goes to the rest of the community here is how do we get produced videos and things like that are as quality as MythBusters, Magic School Bus, and Bill Nye, because it's lacking to me.
I'm curious about the lacking part because I am finding so much wonderful material on YouTube. I mean, you know, Mark Rover, Steve Mold, all Destin from Smarter Every Day. These guys are amazing, and they're all, the best thing about them is that they're all making great money right now. on their channels, which means they're just going to make more weird stuff and tell greater stories. I mean, that's really the thing, is that I really love the alternative business model that YouTube is as opposed to television. I've stopped all development I've been doing of any television shows. Because, well, number one, I'm 56. I was 35 when I started making MythBusters. I'm too old to do a build show anymore. I just can't manage the hours. But again, there are the Mark Robers of the world who can manage those hours and are generating some amazing and beautiful content. You know, one of the things that I have loved over the past few years is getting to know a lot of these YouTubers. Destin from Smarter Every Day throws a small YouTuber con. And I was getting onto a bus and I realized, I think I've fallen asleep to everyone on this bus.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much. MythBusters was a truly pivotal part of my childhood. I literally did a presentation about it in 6th grade.
Was there fire?
We got to like pick our own topic, and I was like, I'm doing MythBusters, and it was great for me. I don't know about anyone else. Anyways, I'm currently a student at UC Berkeley studying sociology. Go Bears! And I really enjoy writing. But as I'm now, looking for a job, I'm a senior. I grapple with like, how do I, do something that I enjoy but also make money.
Yeah.
So I don't know do you have any like advice or just like general like insight on how do you balance creativity and pursuing your passion versus having a house?
Yeah, no, this is a really great question, because they're very different skill sets. Some people are blessed with copious amounts of both of them. Most of us are not. I think that being able to get paid well for your work starts with understanding your value. It starts with understanding what the market will bear. And the first time you make that set of D&D dice and you think that maybe you could charge $75 for them, and that sounds crazy to you that someone will pay you for these dice. The moment that they do, man, take note of what that feels like, because, one of the things I like to say to people who bring me stuff that they've made is I thank them for the time they spent. So I think that knowing your value, and this is also hard to do, you need peer groups that can help support you. One of the things I love about the cosplay community is specifically how supportive it is. The furries too, man, they know how much stuff costs to make and they pay each other fairly for it. I really, really dig that. So your local community can be the place where you learn what the market will bear. And again, there's a real difference between a good day's pay and what the market will bear. And they can be vastly different. And what I'm here to tell you is you should be getting paid what the market will bear, even if it's like 3 times what you've ever been paid before. And being able to, the other thing that I have as advice for young makers starting out is if you're doing anything for other people, the single best thing you can do is establish the terms of engagement in the very first conversation. Because every conversation after the first one, difficult things get harder to say. Things like, I expect to be paid 50% upfront and 50% on delivery. And if I don't have cash on delivery, I'm not handing the object to you. This is something that you should say to somebody until you trust them. And you also will get boned. You will have a client pay you to make something. You will put your heart into it, you'll give it to them, and they will screw you out of your money. That has happened to everybody I know. Happened to me several times. I had to eat it. I'm still pissed about it. But it's going to happen. It's the cost of business. You will have people decide not to pay you California sales tax at the end of a job just because they don't feel like it. All of these ignominies will come upon you. And I think it's great to recognize that making and business management are 2 different skills. And it's great if perhaps you find someone that can help you with the part of it that you are not excellent at. That's usually how a lot of great teams get built, that one is creative and one manages business. I hope that is somewhat useful. Knowing your value is the first and most important thing. Thank you.
Hi Adam, my question is, out of all the experiments you have done, which one was the hardest one to figure out?
The hardest one to figure out? That's a new one. I haven't gotten many new questions about MythBusters. I will say break-step bridge was really difficult. Break-step bridge is the myth that soldiers marching in formation on a bridge structure can impose a fatal harmonic that would cause vibration that you can see there to vibrate enough to start to disintegrate the actual structure. And we thought this is a great thing to test. The real problem is that bridges have been over-designed for millennia for all the best reasons. But literally trying to build a bridge that was just strong enough to hold itself up until we put in a fatal harmonic, I still view that as like one of the biggest fights I ever had with my producer at the time, and this is like season 2, episode 1. That one really kicked our butt. Another one was lead balloon. Lead balloon was another one in which we realized, look, we understood lead balloon, we could just build a long tube and fill it with helium and we'd be done. But that's not fun, that's not television. I wanted a spherical balloon. And so we figured out that we could make a balloon that's about 15 feet in diameter if the lead was 1/1000th of an inch thick. The problem is that most factories that roll lead roll it to about 3 to 5/1000ths of an inch thick. That's totally enough for shielding. 1/1000th is way thinner than most people do. So 2 separate factories broke their equipment attempting to give us lead that was 1/1000th of an inch thick. And then Jamie found this company in Germany called Epstein Foils. And they were like, yeah, we can do it, maybe do 5 microns. And they did, 7/10,000ths of an inch. What is that? That's 10 microns. Yeah, exactly. That one was 2.5 years to find the correct material to shoot that story with. Yeah. Oh.
So, Adam, I've had the great pleasure of reading Every Tool's a Hammer. Over here.
Ah, there you are.
I had the.
Oh, you've been very patient with your arm too. Thank you.
Every Tool's a Hammer is an amazing book. It was a great read. We have 3 copies of it in the house, all autographed, thankfully, because we've gotten to see you so many times. What's your next book?
Oh man, books are such a pain in the ass. I'll tell you, I started it, but I have no idea. Maybe it's 5-10 years away. What happened was in Every Tool's a Hammer, I was writing all this shop philosophy stuff, and the publisher was like, you got anything more specific? And I'm like, what about a chapter on glue? And they were like, yes! And I was like, I'm not really an expert, but I guess I could talk about what I like about glue. And then when the book came out, and people asked me, hey, what about a chapter on tape? I was like, I can't believe I didn't think about a chapter on tape. So I have written a chapter on tape. And it begins with, this may surprise you, but I hate duct tape. I love duct tape as a metaphor, I hate it as a material. It's a fantastic metaphor for making and for the ingenuity of humans, and making duct tape boats has been some of the most fun I have ever had in my life. Getting off the shore breaks of Hawaii or doing class 5 rapids up in the Russian River. But duct tape itself, it rots, it leaves crap on the thing. I don't use it for labeling. It is a temporary solution, and I mean a one-day solution. That's what duct tape is, it's a one-day solution, unless it's a wallet or a prom dress.
All right, Adam, this is your last question for today.
Okay. Hey, red, that's the color my hair used to be. Now I'm a blonde.
Hi, Adam. I was wondering if you had a least favorite MythBusters video or episode.
Well, now there's a few in the running for that. One is Baghdad Battery, in which I got shocked with an electric fence. That was not the fault of my co-hosts. That is all I'll say. I'll tell you, when I finished my speech, somebody over here yelled out, "We see you," and I love you for that. Somebody asked me recently on one of my live streams, how can you best support a young maker? And I said, see them, look at them, and see them where they are. And in that episode, when I got shocked, I was so mad. Getting shocked by an electric fence is like getting hit in the chest with a 2x4. I was so mad, I went outside and sat down. And the cameramen were told to come out and cover me, and they refused. And I felt seen in that moment. There was also a scramble for material in the early days, because we ran out of, let's be honest, we ran out of urban legends by like episode 6. And then it was like, what else do we do? And we brought in this new producer, this wonderful producer, and he ended up tackling pyramid power. I'm sorry about pyramid power. Pyramids will not make your razors sharper. We should never have even started to test that story. It was a brief blip in our and then there are some in which there is a story in which I just remember the least comfortable day of my life. And this was shot over on Alameda on the runway. And we were doing Whirlpool of Death. So I was spent all day in a 10-foot diameter, 18-foot high vessel full of water with the whirlpool in it, throwing up my own lunch and dinner into my experimental methodology. It was one of those San Francisco pissing 40-degree days where it's not raining but the air is wet, so no one gets warm all day long. You can't tell when you watch the episode how just ludicrously unhappy we all are. We're so uncomfortable. But there is also actually a moment of transcendence at the end of that episode. So we go and we film Whirlpool of Death out there on the runway. I throw up my pizza. We get the response. We get the result we were looking for. We wrap the shooting, and I go off to my car to nap off my nausea. And I sleep for 25 minutes, and I wake up, and now it's dark, and the crew is packing out. And I look over from my car, and I can see that Jamie's got the boom lift. He's operating the extended reach forklift, and they're about to try and lift this 18-foot high container, which weighs thousands of pounds. And I stumble out of my car, and I walk over, and Jamie looks over and he sees me, and I just give him the high sign, and he makes a couple of gestures that tells me precisely what his plan is, and I give a thumbs up. And then the rest of the crew sees me come out, they get out of the way, and Jamie and I conduct this beautiful dance of extremely huge earth-moving equipment and thousands of pounds of stuff quietly being moved safely over into a corner. And it's those moments with the Heinemann that I felt the most plugged into the train tracks of another's mind stream. And that is a deeply pleasurable experience. Thank you so much for that question. Thank you guys for all the amazing questions. Thank you for the love and support. And thank you for being out here representing makers. This is literally our future, and I love you guys.
Thank you, Adams. Thank you.
Thank you.